It's time to talk about the Angus soundtrack with Angus himself, Charlie Talbert.
What's up?
Things are gonna change. I can feel it.
If this gonna be that kind of party, I'm gonna...
Waterproof Records. Waterproof Records. Waterproof Records with Jacob Gibbons.
Let's do this. I am so thrilled that I could get you on the show. I mean, first of all, we're friends, we're pals, but we don't get to see each other that often because we live, halfway across the country.
Yes, you in Budapest and myself in New Orleans.
Yes, I'm in Budapest. A lot of people don't know that Waterproof Records is a solely Budapest sponsored show. Isn't it Budapest? Isn't that what they're supposed to say? Budapest?
Yes,
Like
I have a
your
list though, so I shouldn't do that. Things get violent. Machinery will break.
Well, what's so great about this is right now for my listeners, they're tuning in, and the Angus soundtrack has come up many times in comments and whatnot because it is, when you're talking, I've become this 90s authority of music somehow over the summer, and I'm loving it. But it's been a lot of fun, and so I decided to do a show, Waterproof Records, which talks about bands that I loved back then, bands that I love now, just music in general. And so I'm sitting here and I'm like, if I talk about the Angus soundtrack, I get to have Angus on the show because I know Charlie. And I want to tell the audience how we met. I'm going to tell them the story of how we got to know one another. By the way, I love that you have this Bill Murray candle
It's
right
for
there.
you. It's in honor of your TikTok.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that. We're gonna talk about that TikTok and how the very first TikTok you ever made was for me.
It's for you, from you.
So Charlie and I met, kind of long story short, we were doing stand-up comedy here in LA, and obviously he lived in LA for, how long were you here for?
Oh gosh, 23 years, I think.
23 years? You were in Los Angeles? So pretty much from Angus onward for a while, right?
Yeah, that's about right. I told my grandma I'd be back in 2 weeks after high school ended, and I never came back.
Well, so you'd been here for a long time. I was just starting out in stand-up comedy, and I don't know, how many years had you been doing it, or had you been just kind of dipping your toe in, or?
I think I did it for a solid 2 years.
2 years.
So maybe towards the beginning of it, actually, probably because I was there for like a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You knew a lot more people when I met him. So we went to this place called the Ha Ha Club, Ha Ha Cafe in North Hollywood. And that's where I met Charlie. And he was just one of these really great guys. And the funny thing was, I thought he was really funny and we got along really well. And I remember he would like come in. You had a tie and a button-up shirt when you'd get up on stage. And you looked great. And I got along with you well. And then I didn't put two and two together that you were Angus until like way later. And I remember there was a night that we were at the Ha Ha Cafe doing an open mic, and you said something on stage. You go, "Well, that's it for me, you guys. I'm moving to New Orleans." And I came up to you afterwards, and I was like, no, you can't go. And we hugged, and we exchanged numbers. And I was like, I got to keep in touch with you. And you're like, yeah. And so this is what I love about this story is you said what everybody who kind of knows somebody says, which is, if you're ever in New Orleans, look me up.
Look me up. Call me.
And you know what? I took you up on that offer, where a lot of times people throw that out and they say it and you go, our paths will never meet again, But I had the opportunity about 2 years later. I think you'd been there for about 2 years, 2014. Yeah. I had this opportunity to go do stand-up comedy in New Orleans. And like any broke LA performer, I was like, how am I going to go to New Orleans and justify it? I have a kid. I got to figure out how to pay for this plane ticket. So I was talking to my wife and I was like, well, maybe I could come up with like a solution for where to stay.
Maybe we could sell the baby.
Maybe we could sell
it, or put it on loan.
I pitched her that first and she did. Yeah. She considered it. But she said, do you know anybody in New Orleans? And suddenly, like a flashback, I saw in slow-mo Charlie going, if you're ever in New Orleans, look me up. And I was like, Charlie. And
Well, that's why I said it to you in slow motion in the
It's
first
totally-
place, so it really sink in.
I was like, why is he doing this now? And then later it dawned on me. I was like, oh, because it was an important part of the story that he says it in slow motion. So I reached out and I was nervous at first because I thought, yeah, we got a chance to talk a little bit in LA, but I thought this is definitely me kind of overstepping friendship boundaries so early on. But I reached out and he just said, sure, stay with me. And I did. And
I have
stayed.
a great picture too of you like on a pallet on my floor, like looking up over the bed, you know.
I know. I remember
That's
that. It was
amazing.
so great. He was so hospitable, welcomed me into his house. I stayed with him, got a chance to eat beignets in the French Quarter. He showed me some delicious food, and I got to do my comedy shows, and we get to spend time together. And I really cherished that trip. I haven't been back since. I long to get back there again someday, but we've kept up over the years, and I'm glad we have. And now here we are, reunited, and it feels so good.
It feels so good to be. But I gotta tell you,
Okay.
Huge shout out to Jack Asadorian and his dad for
Yeah.
letting me work out at the and letting us play there, because that really got me through some stuff. Between that and Aaron Marsh, that's what really got me through doing the stand-up comedy.
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron was the one that you got to know through stand-up?
He was my Yoda.
He
He's
was your
also
Yoda.
a small fella, so
He
I just
is
was
a very
like,
small
"You're
fella."
Yoda."
Yeah.
And he's
Yeah.
like, "Great."
Did
thank
you carry him
Thank you.
in a satchel when you went to the haha?
Much to his dismay and disagreement, yes.
Yeah, shout out to those guys who really gave us a lot of fun opportunities to share our jokes and try out new ideas at that place that then moved. It was in a different location, and then now since the pandemic, I haven't been back since. But I went there.
Shout out to all of our fellow, comedians
Yeah.
that work with us, like Ryan Demarest. Big
Yeah.
love to everybody.
Absolutely, Ryan. That was a very, very hard thing that happened when he passed, and I actually, the very first episode of this show, I kind of dedicated it to him because it was really the impetus for why I started the TikToks in the first place. Was he had just passed, and I was talking about how he and I would always geek out over bands. We would talk about Metallica and Slayer, and we would just like get into our metalhead ways. And when he passed, that was really the moment that I was struck with like how important music and bands are for me, and that was with my friendship with Brian as well. And so I really have, the spirit of funny Ryan D, who I feel has been with me since this whole thing started. So I'm so glad you shouted him out as well. But let's give the audience kind of a little breakdown. Charlie not only is Angus, he's a working actor. He's been in film and television. I saw him recently in The Watchmen. I was like, Charlie. So that's
awesome.
the thing. And then you were in that, the big, what's that one? The Big Short. The Big Short.
The Big Short.
And you've been in a ton of projects, but that's one of my favorite things about when you become friends with an actor, an entertainer, and you just see them randomly pop up in film and TV shows that you're watching. You're like, Charlie! It's that DiCaprio meme, where he's pointing like this. That's what I do every time I see you.
Yeah, and from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah,
He's like,
yeah.
I know that guy.
Oh! So let's bring the audience up to speed, I guess, let's talk a little bit about, before we get into the soundtrack, because it's a music podcast, this was your first movie. Angus is your first film, correct?
That's right. I told a joke in a Wendy's, and Patrick Reed Johnson came up to me and said, "Hey, you want to be in a movie?" And I looked at him and I said, "Are you gay? Are you hitting on me? Is that what this is?"
Is that what this is?
And he goes, "What?" I go, "Well, I'm a fat kid. I got tits. It's near Chicago. It's 12 o'clock at night, and you want me to be in a movie."
Right.
He's like, "Oh, no."
Yeah, right. He's like, I have reasons to be suspicious given the time and day and the situation that we're in right now that this could be a proposition. But he was legitimately a Hollywood director and wanted to put you in this movie.
Yes, and he directed one of my favorite movies at the time, which was Space Invaders.
Yeah.
And he discovered Ariana Richards from Jurassic Park and Space Invaders.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, she's going to be the love interest." It's very much like Rudy. In fact, our casting director is the casting director from Rudy.
I didn't know that.
Chicago, and that was Jane Alderman. And he's like, "Yeah, come down to Chicago and go above Planet Hollywood, and we'll help you read for a movie." And I went home and I was like, "Mom, I'm going to be in a movie." And she's like, "Yeah, shut the go to bed." I was like,
Okay.
Yeah,
Sure.
You're going to see. The soundtrack's going to be amazing. You'll see.
It'll be an iconic film. It'll be a coming of age film in the 90s that people will constantly refer back to over and over again. Oh, that's so cool. That is those stories that you rarely get a chance to hear because you hear like 1 in a million that somebody has found in a public place and they go, I'm going to put you in pictures, kid. You know, the guy with a cigar, but it happened. Had you thought about acting before this, Wendy's in Illinois?
I was always a bit of a goofball. Like I did a lot of school plays and stuff like that. In fact, I used to have this ritual, even in elementary school. I would sleep at the school the night before because I always became friends with the janitor, and every one of my family members knew all these janitors because we all went to the same school.
Yeah.
So they would let me crash like in the stage area, and I would just hide and crash. And that was my thing. And it just was like, well, it's either this or I'm going to be on unemployment and then eventually working at Wendy's. So that, that was my goal.
Did you grow up in the Chicago suburbs?
I'm from Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. You're a Wisconsin guy.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, born and bred, but it's only like an hour and 20 minutes away from Chicago. So that was the big place to go. In fact, that was the first time I'd ever actually been to Chicago.
Yeah. You and I, we're the same age. I'm pretty sure we're almost exactly the same age. And I moved to the Chicago suburbs when I was in high school. So it was that was like a big uprooting for me as well. When I was around 15, 16, around the age you were when you made this movie, I was picked up and taken out of Tulsa, which I mean, I'm grateful I left Oklahoma in the long run. But I was picked up and thrown in Naperville, Wheaton area of Chicago. And that really I was an actor in high school, but that kind of opened the door because, when you're in Chicago, you're exposed to a lot more theater performance. There's creative things happening around you. And I was like, oh, this could actually be, I could do this for a living maybe. So this was the moment where you got chosen to be in this film. And what was it? Was it like they just flew you to LA or what happened next?
Well, basically it was, hey, I'd love for you to come down and read for this, come down to Chicago, come in on Wednesday, and you'll come to the office and meet the cast director and what have you. So I took my mom after a lot of convincing and also the chaperone convincing her that it was a real guy. Yeah. I went there, I went upstairs. There was a kind of a fat kid leaving that looked kind of like me. I'm like, well, I'm in the right place. So I go into the room and it's really weird because it's very Chicago office, like, everything is like cherry wood. Everything's dark. And there's one corner with a little setup for standing in and auditioning with a light. And it's dark everywhere else. And the director's behind his chair, turned sideways in the swivel chair. And he turns and he goes, he's not looking at me. And he goes, go ahead and read your sides. And I go, what's the sides?
What's the sides?
Well, I swore, I don't know if you can swear on this
You
podcast,
can swear. You can say whatever the fuck you want on this show.
So I says, what the fuck's the sides? And he goes, well, excuse me? And I go, and he goes, oh, you're the kid. You're the kid. I blah, 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 Yeah. And I go, yeah. He goes, so we started talking about my life and he was noticing that it mirrored Angus a whole bunch. Yeah. And he goes, well, can you do impersonations? Do you tell jokes? I was like, I knew impersonations. He goes, well, give me one. I said, all right, here's Jim Morrison. And I ran to the corner and I turned away from him and I hid my face in the corner and went, come on, baby, let me fall. And he goes, wow, that's crazy good. Like, he's like, that's so stupid. It's so esoteric. Yeah. And then he's like, what else you got? And I did Elvis and Goofy and all this stuff. And he's like, that's pretty cool. He's like, I'm going to give you these sides, which are a little script. And you take that little script and you're going to learn your lines and you're going to come back here next week. I won't be here. Jane will be here, etc. And I'm like, cool. I didn't get it. Fuck. That's cool. Yeah. So yeah. There was the opportunity.
I blew it. Damn Jim Morrison impersonation.
Why did I not know the lines that I was never given? And so I went back. I auditioned a couple weeks later. They called and said, hey, we'd love to fly out to California. We'll put you up at the Radisson by Santa Monica Boulevard and, at 3rd Street Promenade. And I was like, okay. And it was like, we'll give you $60 a day, $80 a day, something like that. And we'll fly you first class, you and your guardian. And I was like, sweet. So I went out and I walk in the next day. I go in and I see Whoopi Goldberg walking by me. And I'm like, oh my God. Yeah. And then I didn't know it at the time, but there was Ethan Suplee, and these other actors that were reading for roles. And I'm sure I saw Chris Owen, who played my best friend in the movie. Yeah. And they bring me into the room. I sit down. And they're like, hey, we're going to bring in somebody in to read with you. And they bring in Chris Owen. And they're like, hey, we'll be back in a few minutes. We didn't realize this, but we started finishing each other's jokes and having a good time. Yeah. But what we didn't know is there was a camera in the room on, and they were all in the other room watching us to see if we were getting along.
Oh, wow.
And they came back in and they're like, hey, we're not going to read you guys. What we're going to do is, you're cool with it because, we got stuff going on. We want to bring another guy in, which would be James Vanderbeek, we would later find out. Yeah. And we'd like to give you a couple $100 a piece and just send you to Disneyland for the weekend. Is that cool? See if
And you
get
guys are like,
along.
sweet.
And I'm like, who's not getting along in the happiest place on earth with $200 in their pocket?
Right,
And Chris is like,
totally.
shut up. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, cool. Yeah, we'll do it. And we did it, had a great time, came back. And then, we read with James, who I didn't get along with right away, which is great.
Yeah,
I
it was good for the movie. Good for the movie, right?
And then, but he said it's so brilliant, so friendly. It was just, I was nervous. I didn't know, so I had one friend on my side and I knew there was supposed to be a dynamic. So I was trying to play into it. And then they sent me home, and about 3 weeks later, I get a call from the director, and he's like, "Hey man, I'm so sorry. I appreciate you coming in and spending all the time, but I feel terrible that you're gonna have to spend the next 4 months with us." And I was like, "Yeah, well, what?
Wait. Aw, that's so sweet.
That was it. Yeah,
I love it. What a story. And so, it is one of those movies that I remember, and this was really big in the 90s, which was the soundtrack dropped before the movie did. It was literally like, I remember listening to the radio and hearing that Green Day JAR song and being like,
Yes.
What is this? This isn't on Dookie. I need to get this song immediately because I loved it. It's got that iconic at the end where it sounds like it cuts off. He doesn't say that last lyric, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
Wait, what?
it's
What
play.
happened?
You want to play?
You want to play?
That's
All
what you
I
want to
do is say. All I want to do is play. What's the last line? And it is so clever, and that has always stuck with me. And so I remember rushing out, and I bought the Angus CD. And I didn't even know what the movie was. I was like, I don't know what this movie is, but I love the soundtrack. I'm looking at the back. I'm seeing Weezer. I'm seeing Green Day. I'm like, oh, count me in. So I had that soundtrack for years. And I think that first time I actually saw the movie might have been, a VHS rental. I don't remember actually seeing it in the theaters. And it is a very, very 90s vibe movie, like the cut scenes where you've got the music playing. It is got all the 90s energy in it.
Oh no, it's definitely all the guitar gains were high and
Yes.
all the moral expectations were low,
Yes.
and the angst was filling the room. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And something that I've forgotten is not only you got you and James Vanderbeek and some really recognizable young faces, but the older cast, you've got George C. Scott, you've got Kathy Bates,
Rita Moreno.
I when I went back and watched it again, I was like, that's Rita Moreno doing the choreography. Rita Moreno, kids, was freaking Anita in West Side Story. This is like, these are some really, and then this was something that I never caught before, but please tell me I'm right. The old man playing chess with George C. Scott is Irving Kershner.
The director of Empire Strikes Back, yes, and he was a huge.
Why? How? He doesn't say a word.
So you'll notice on my IMDb, if you guys go to my IMDb, you're going to see a title in there that says 52577, and the director of Angus wrote a story, which I actually shot the first few shots for in California in 2007.
Really?
But it's about him being the very first Star Wars fan. He was allowed to go see the movie before anyone who didn't work on the movie saw the movie. And so that became he became like a legend, and he loved Irving Kershner. So he asked for that favor after he became friends with him and said, would you be in the film? And as sure as heck, he was in the film. And he told me he was so giddy about who he was. And I'm just like, this is cool. Yeah.
I was giddy because, when I saw it in the 90s, I didn't put two and two together. But then when I rewatched it, I was watching, I was like, is that? No. Why would Irving Kershner be the guy playing chess across from George C. Scott? But I love it. What a cameo. And then George C. Scott, he passed, I believe, in 99. So only about 4 years after this movie was made. How did you guys get along on set? Was he a kind man, or was he very focused and stern?
I also want to mention Larry Pressman from Doogie Howser, who played the principal, who's phenomenal, who I was like giddy over meeting. But I would tell you, the moment that George C. Scott got out of the car, I'm wearing my new Air Jordans because I had a little money now. I was like,
yeah, of course. Hey, man, you're freaking Angus.
And that was just, I wanted something cool. I haven't been a welfare kid and broke and all that stuff, so I got these shoes. And I'm outside playing basketball, and I'm thinking I'm feeling cool at that moment until I look up, and who gets out of the limo? It's George C. Scott, and he goes, "Oh, you must be Charlie." And I'm like, oh, Oh my God, General Patton knows my name.
General Patton himself just turned up on set. I
He
know.
knows my name. You know,
Yeah.
what was it like working with Peter Sellers? What was it like him working with you? Like,
Totally.
it was just like the hand in hand. Those were my two favorites at the time.
Yeah.
And it was just beyond belief. And then meeting Kathy Bates was not an unequal feat, because she let me pick out the cover to Dolores Claiborne. So the cover of Dolores Claiborne is the one I picked, and she had final say so, and she made the call right then and there. And that's how she bonded with me. And it was just so beautiful and wonderful.
She's such a rock star of an actor. She, in that movie, when she's getting real serious about you getting bullied on, I was watching it and I was going, look at the A game. Look at the A game on this one. You know, when she talks about, like, you don't think I don't know what he puts up with. I'm like, woo, Kathy Bates bringing the heat right now. She's really got those chops that kind of blow you out of the water, you know?
You know, I got to tell you something. It's kind of strange. I've done a lot of podcasts. I've done a lot of things, regarding Angus, especially during the pandemic. I just went through and looked at hashtag Angus and would respond to all the people that did something. You know, in fact, I did that on TikTok today.
Oh,
and I
my
went
gosh.
through everybody that talks about Angus in any way, even if they were slamming it. Yeah. And I was there was a podcast called Teenage Slumber Party, and they were kind of trashing Angus a little bit, and
really?
I agreed with them. Because what had happened, and there's two actors in here that you only see for a brief second within the film, and that's when Grandpa dies. One who's in the kitchen with my mom, and one who doesn't have a line, who turned towards me, who's standing next to Kathy Bates when I come down and I'm crying, and she knows what happened.
Yeah.
And that was Larry Drake. And they played my gay fathers, and Kathy Bates was gay. And then the movie, they cut it out because they did not know. They were afraid of the audience retribution, because we had picketers on set when we were shooting, because as part of a town, you're allowed to read the script, and they were just anti about it. So there's a lot of the scenes in the movies that were cut out. So it's a lot of me just being an angsty teenager without the torment and coming to realization moments that I had with my fathers.
Wow.
You know, especially Larry Drake, and, you know, certain conversations I had with my mom and things like that. So it became a different movie. In fact, a little hint is, a little Easter egg is, we weren't listening to Mazzy Star when we were dancing. Really? In fact, I didn't know they were going to be on the soundtrack until I saw the movie at the premiere. And what it was Katie Lang's Calling All Angels that we were dancing to. So it was kind of interesting, but now I cannot hear Mazzy Star without
thinking about it. Yeah.
You know, that's the moment. So I experienced it like the fans experienced it, and I fell in love with it.
Thank you for sharing that story. And I know you've probably talked about this movie so much in your life and been on so many podcasts, but I'm so glad you came on this one to talk about that, because it's really important. That time period in 1995, being gay was still a very, very, it could ruin your career. You know, this was the time, this was the era where Ellen came out, and it was a huge backlash. And it just wasn't acceptable. And even there were bold, when you read about the Angus soundtrack, you read about, they put Pansy Division on the soundtrack, which was the first openly gay punk band, which is in of itself a way of signaling to the public, like, by the way, we're very pro LGBTQ, like, we are supportive of this. And it's interesting that they had written that into the story and had to kind of take it out, because it could have ruined the film given the tone of people at the time. Right. Well,
yeah, and I didn't know much about Pansy Division when I heard about the soundtrack, and that line where it's like all the gays are in San Francisco, and I was like, and that's too far away. And I was just like, yes, and the movie, the original script meant so much to me. Joe Gordon had penned the script, and then I know that John Lau and Patrick Reed Johnson went in, they worked together, and they tweaked it, but I was really kind of heartbroken. And I found out, sadly, through like an ADR session that I wasn't supposed to be at, all the changes in the movie. And I was just like, oh, no. So the movie wasn't what I expected it to be. And it was advertised in a way where it was going to be this teenage comedy, but it wasn't. And that's the nice thing about the Angus fans now, is the Angus fans who watched it got it and told their friends. And now it has this huge following. Yeah. And I adore that. And I adore the fans for that, because I know what the movie originally meant to me. And it still will mean the world to me, Sure. But in fact, this is you can't see it on a podcast, but this is Criterion poster from a fan.
Yeah, I love it.
You know?
I love it. When I saw you hang that up in the TikTok, I love that image of the Petri dish with that red dot in it. That's so great. And actually, some people do watch the show. Like I do put this on YouTube, so the ones who tune into the video version, they'll be able to see that. But it's
well,
so
I'm gonna
cool.
put on pants then.
Yeah, you better put it on. It's fine. It's a pantless podcast. But that is so cool. Let's dig in a little bit to some of the songs. I want to ask right out of the gate, do you have a favorite song on the soundtrack? One that really speaks to you more than anything else?
It's for me, it's always Mazzy Star hits me.
Yeah.
Because I was in love with a girl from kindergarten to 12th grade that never was really mine, Yeah. But I got to tell you that opening song mixed with the,
Love Spit Love. Yep.
Yeah. And Am I Wrong? And they mixed it with the Warren Township high school band, which is where Patrick went to school. And that's that combo. And every time I hear that, my heart just beats the right beat, and that everything is all right in the world. And sometimes when I have an audition, I'll listen to that beforehand. I'm working on a show right now with Elizabeth Olsen and Jesse Plemons, directed by Leslie Linkaglatter and David Kelly. And this is called Love and Death for HBO Max.
Yeah.
And I have to do something I have to find out something bad in this. So I listen to the Angus soundtrack to feel good. Yeah. And then to have the air sucked out of me before I go to set, which is kind of great.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, that iconic Love Spit Love with the marching band. What school did you say it was? You said
the Warren Township high school band.
Where was that? Is that a Chicago?
That's in Illinois. Warren.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that sounds familiar now because I went to Wheaton North when the 1 year that I was there. So now I remember the name of that school. So holy cow.
I was in Northbrook, Illinois when I got discovered. I was coming home from the Northbrook cycling, and we were at that Wendy's that hangs over the freeway as you're heading back into Wisconsin.
I know exactly where that is.
But he was going back to Warren, I guess, from Milwaukee. So just kind of,
wow. That's so cool. Is the movie supposed to take place in Illinois? No, it's supposed to be Owatonna, which is
Owatonna, Minnesota.
Minnesota, that's right. It's supposed to be taking place in Minnesota, but
we shot in Owatonna, Minnesota. Yeah. We definitely took that high school over. They even built the lunchbox across the street out of like a broken down garage.
Really,
and the gift was they would keep it. They would really build it, and they really built it and left it there.
That's so cool. I knew it was Minnesota, and then you can tell that the majority of the film, you're like, this isn't California. There was only one scene, which was the roller skating rink, that I was like, that looks like Moonlight Rollerway over near Burbank or whatever, which is a skating rink here. Is it? It
is, and then also there's a scene that's split. There's a scene where we're outside of the school. And when you're looking at the school's direction, which is my direction, that was shot in California. But when you look in the reverse and you're seeing Ariana talking about being bulimic, you can see that it's like cold. Her nose is super red and running.
Totally.
So it's a whole different world.
That's a whole totally different temperature, right? It's so funny. I love the magic of movies. I've made an indie film, so I know how it goes. We have shots where somebody's talking to somebody in Wisconsin, and then it's Los Angeles. It's like, nobody knows. Right. It's so great. But Love Spit Love, I'm glad you mentioned that one because I don't, being a music dork, Love Spit Love was a side project, kind of from Richard Butler of the Psychedelic Furs. And so he basically, like in 91, I think Psychedelic Furs are kind of, coming apart. So he starts Love Spit Love. And what I love about the use of Am I Wrong in this film is here you have this coming of age high school story in the 90s, and the Psychedelic Furs are responsible for Pretty in Pink. So you have this great little bookend between that voice that you hear, from Love Spit Love, which is also, the same guy from the Psychedelic Furs. So I thought that was like I'm sure the music supervisors were like really thinking through, because this soundtrack does seem to be very thought through. Like I want to choose these artists. And I read that the music supervisors on Angus were also at the time managing Green Day and the Muffs. Yes. And so, of course, their bands are included, and not only included, but Green Day is brought up in the film multiple times.
Yes, originally that was not Green Day. He was excited to get tickets to Offspring. In fact, in the movie, when you see Chris and I doing our little headbanging dance moments, you can see that's clearly in front of a gray screen. That was our screen test just to try on different clothes. and they just included it in the montage of the movie of us changing Angus's looks.
I love
and
it.
we are dancing to Keep 'Em Separated.
Keep 'Em Separated.
And then
So
sometime
great.
after, I saw an interview on MTV that Rivers Cuomo was in and Billy was in, and they were talking. He's like, oh, and Billy was like, yeah, we're doing a soundtrack for the movie Angus. And Rivers is like, I'm writing a song for that movie right now. And that song I just discovered during the pandemic is called Wanda.
You beat me to it. You beat me to it.
My brain blew up, and I was like, "Are you kidding me? This is a song."
What's so great about this story, and I didn't know this either, because I mean, hey, I just as the host, I did my research, and I mean, You Gave Your Love to Me Softly. I love that song by Weezer, and it was on the Angus soundtrack, and then it was featured on all sorts of like B-sides and albums that they would put out there. It's a great song. And I was reading this thing about the soundtrack, and it was like, well, originally Rivers writes this song called Wanda. And it's called like The Love of My Life or whatever. That's in parentheses. He writes the song, he presents it, and in the song, which I listened to, I found it. He put it out in a thing called Home Recordings, which came out in 2007. And it's just really, you can tell it's like a demo in his apartment or wherever he's living. And this song, he's singing what Angus would probably be saying, like just kind of this self-loathing and feeling like an outcast. He gives it to the soundtrack, the music supervisors, and they go, this is way too similar to what the plot of the movie is. Like, this is so strictly following the story of Angus. We don't want it. And it hurt his feelings. Rivers was sad.
And I get that. And I'm wondering if it's because of the script changes that were made. I wonder if that would have stuck around, because I really love that song. And I didn't hear it until the pandemic.
I didn't hear it until just last week. I was like, I've never heard this song. That's amazing too. And you're in the movie and you have the soundtrack, and you did, hadn't heard it yet. But that's a really good story as well. And then here, let me go back to the track list. I've got to remember what we've got here. We've got Angus track list. Okay, so we talked about...
I remember, I will tell you, it was kind of interesting. We got to go see, and we were given a handful of backstage passes. We got to go on stage, and we got to go see Green Day perform at Carson City.
Really?
And we come into the back room, and Billy's like, who are these pukes? And I was like, what? I'm like, hi, I'm Charlie. I'm the kid from Angus. He's like, oh, that's great. And I'm like, why are you talking like that? Because I don't know. And we just all hung out, and we were just joking around and just having a good time. And I have a picture from that. That was pretty amazing.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. I you've got to show me that picture someday. That would be incredible.
I will.
But they, so we start out the soundtrack with JAR, Jason Andrew Relva, which apparently is Mike Dirnt had lost a friend to a car accident, I believe, from growing up, and that's the name of the friend, Jason Relva. And it's just such a high energy, such a great song with a tragic backstory to it. But it's a great way to open up this film, which we're now learning from you, a film that had a lot more depth and heart and layers to it that were supposed to be there from the beginning. So
right. Kate Hudson, who was working with Brian Rodriguez on that Slumber Party podcast, they were talking about Brian. She goes, yeah, but there wasn't a lot of change in his depth. It was very, and Brian goes, yeah, it was just a kid. Actually, to me, I liked it because it was just a kid that it seemed like a 13, 14-year-old kid living his life around this and not knowing how to deal with it. And I was like, you're both right.
Yeah, you're both right.
And I got on there. We did like Angus Strikes Back, and we talked about it. I was like, this is like, I feel exactly how you feel,
Yeah.
And it's really neat to see a lot of these fans that have discovered this. And there was an accidental airing of one of the original versions of Angus on TBS once, and I saw that.
You're kidding me.
Yeah, it had the scene with me and Larry Drake, and I'd ridden my bike to his house, and we were talking about what was going on in my life and how I was feeling about it. And it just disappeared.
Wow. They would be smart to re-release like a director's cut or like a we just celebrated the 20th anniversary of Angus last fall, right? We're at year 25th.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. What am I talking about? Not 20th, 25th. I'm losing track of time. 25 years. So this is a good time if that, I hope maybe we can get the word out there.
Exists.
Huh? It doesn't exist.
As far as bad, all the footage is gone.
Oh.
So I think that's the world on that. I'd love to see it, it's kind of weird that I have a different memory of a movie.
Totally,
which is insane. So.
Yeah, it is. So then we move on to Enough by the Dance Hall Crashers. This was another, this is very fitting of the time. It's that ska sound with the horns. And I think you hear this right when you guys get to prom. I think it's the first song. When you get to the,
enough is enough.
Enough is enough.
Yeah,
Da,
yeah.
da, da. I was on the fence about ska back then, and I still am to this day. I can kind of get into some of like the hits, but I didn't nosedive into the ska scene. What about you? Did you get into the ska sound at all?
I did a little bit only because I found out that the lead singer and the entire group actually, Real Big Fish, were huge Angus fans.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I found that out at a restaurant that was called Twain's on Coldwater and Ventura when I met them. And it was just, and I was with Chris. So you can't really look at us and not go, that's
totally
these two, And Chris, through the American Pie movies, great. He gained a great following. So whenever we'd be together, they'd be like, "You're the dude from America," and they're like, "No."
And then they would put it together, right? Because they'd see you guys side by side. You and Chris are still close to this day, right?
He's my best friend to the end.
To the end. Does he?
I'm his Chucky.
Is he out here? Is he out here
in
now?
Boston now.
He's in
Boston with his wife.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That makes me. I told that to my wife as we were rewatching the film together. I was like, and by the way, he became best pals with Chris Owen, and they're friends to this day. And she's like, oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah, I think we've done like 14 projects together. In fact, I wrote and produced like a cartoon over the bandy, and he came in and read with us. And it was
that's awesome.
It was just really fun. But it's it's one of those things where that bond was real from the moment we met, and it just
you can tell.
Worked.
One of the things that I love that they included in the film, which was when you guys would kind of insult each other and then you would recover quickly. And I thought that's pretty representative of how boys are at that age, that kind of, dishing it, giving each other some insults and just being like, well, we're not really that serious. You know what I mean? Like we can joke like this and then just pick ourselves up and go again instead of it making it a big old thing every single time,
Which is strange because behind the scenes, we would do the same thing, but with switchblades.
You guys are always just totally, tying your wrists together and doing the beat it dance with switchblades.
And we'd be like, Rita, sing it. And
go.
she'd be like, I'm not doing the shark song.
I'm not going to do Jets versus Shark, guys. Stop it. Stop
it. Not happening.
I love it. So then we have the Riverdales, Back to You. That one on there, I had to look up a little bit. Riverdales actually was like an alternate project from the members of Screeching Weasel, a Chicago punk band. So Riverdales was like, it's not a side project. It was a whole other band, but it was basically the members of this band, Screeching Weasel. They go make the Riverdales. And when you hear that song, you hear this enormous like Ramones influence. Like the Riverdale song sounds like a band that's like, we love the Ramones, so we want to play music that sounds like the Ramones.
I got to tell you, most of the soundtrack, it really sounds like most of it sounds like it came from the same garage.
Yeah. It does. It does.
And that's a credit to, them putting the music together in a proper way. And I think that's why Angus, really kind of, the soundtrack is really what gave Angus its following, because the soundtrack blew up. It did. Angus came out around the same time as Babe.
Yeah,
we weren't going to win against Babe. That was not happening. I mean, I didn't eat pork for a long time, is what I'm saying. But no. But I would tell you that the soundtrack brought people to the movie, it brought people to reality, and then they would meet up and talk with these people that were hardcore fans that started in the theater with it or VHS with it, and then it just became this build up till eventually Warner Brothers, who had the rights to it, finally, bought the rights to the music.
Right.
And now I've started to see residual checks again from Angus, which is insane.
And
and
I love
just
it.
like, wow, it's amazing. Yeah, it's just amazing that we keep, touching people's lives, and that's really what it's about.
And in the 90s, I said this a little bit up top, but this is a thing that has gone away. They just don't do this anymore. But it was very synonymous in that era, probably late 80s into the 90s, and even drifting into the early 2000s, which was you make this soundtrack and you make it strong. So much so that the soundtrack stands on its own. You've got films like The Singles soundtrack totally stands on its own from the movie from Cameron Crowe. Then you've got The Crow. Then you've got Angus. Then you've got all these movie soundtracks that really people would go out, buy the soundtrack because it would come out a month or two before the movie comes out. And then you'd just be jazzed to go see the movie and see where all this great music is going to be fitting in the story. And so that is something that needs to come back. They need to figure out that like loading a movie soundtrack with these amazing, cutting edge bands, cutting of age, music. Like if you were to load up a soundtrack now with some modern, like kind of just now burgeoning music scenes, throw it on a movie soundtrack and release it, I think it would help the film. So listen up, Hollywood. We know what we're talking about, right?
Well, the other way is but you can't do it now so much after Pandy Times, but before, all the movies I did afterwards, I would just go to Vegas with like a bunch of those business cards.
Yeah.
And I just flick it on my hands and be like, see a movie? See a movie? See a movie? And so because the soundtracks weren't that good.
Yeah. They got to get those soundtracks right. So then we talked about You Gave Your Love to Me Softly by Weezer, which is a great song. Oh, I'm reading these out of order, doggone it. Thanks, Google. I had the soundtrack and it's literally listing them side by side, so I'm kind of jumping around. Whoops, I'm not going in order, guys. So that's not cool. I forgot about Jack Names the Planets by Ash, which is a...
Jack Names the Planets Newell Finup.
Yeah, that, and then he says that thing at the very beginning. That guy's like, "It's the song Jack Named the Planets" or whatever. I don't know what the story is behind that, but he's
names the planets Newell Finup.
That's a Northern Ireland band, a Northern Irish band, Ash, and they appear twice on the soundtrack. And this song, Jack Names the Planets, was kind of the how every movie has the music video to promote the film. This was that song.
That's what that. Yeah,
they had the video with footage of you guys from the movie. It's the live music, and it's like that's the song that is like this is what we're going to use to promote Angus. So that one really stands out as like a
and
very
it was kind of
song.
brilliant, the video, because what they're showing in the video is the kid getting lost in his music, and when it's taken away from him, all the kid's essence is gone, and so they're just like, buy the music, it will make you feel all the feels. Totally. And they were right.
They were right.
In this particular instance, because this soundtrack is killer.
Yeah.
What they put in it. Obviously, there's some stuff missing, but
Yeah, it's great. It's great. And then we have Kung Fu, also by Ash, that came. So we basically had Green Day, then Ash, Jack Names the Planets, then Dance Hall Crashers, then Kung Fu by Ash, another great song. Then we went on to the Riverdales. Then we have Mrs. You and Me by the Smoking Popes, which were, they were popping up on soundtracks left and right. They were also on the Clueless soundtrack, and they were a Chicago band. And they really stuck out to me because they were like this, kind of punk rock band. But the lead singer was singing like he was, Michael Bublé. He was like, and I'll see you 6 feet underground. That's the song from Clueless. But again, Here is another band that really was kind of showing how in the 90s, everybody was trying everything in rock and roll, like just everything to stand out. We just left the grunge movement. Now we've got bands coming out left and right, and so Smoking Popes were good. But I don't remember where this plays in the movie. Where the Smoking
I couldn't tell you. I think it. Oh wait, I want to say it's when I'm working on the computer and I'm thinking about her and I pick up a picture of her.
Oh, that is it. That is it. Yeah. I think you're right.
And I'm thinking about our future together, and because that's what 15-year-old boys should be thinking about.
That's right. Totally. That's what they do.
The future.
Mrs. You and Me, the name of the song. So fitting.
Exactly. And it was love, and he's freaking out over a picture. And then he's like, you know what? I'm going to dance with Wanda. And he picks up his blow-up doll, which sat in my living room for about a decade after my grandma proudly displayed it.
I wanted to know what happened to the blow-up Wanda. And so that you had it for a long time, huh?
Yeah, I think my mom ended up with it, and then it went the way of the wind. But it kept her happy for years. So.
It's gone.
Yeah, she's gone. Oh. She's gone with the wind.
Oh well, one day I'm going to send you another Wanda.
I remember the face replacement for her because Wanda was a real live-action blow-up doll.
Oh yeah. It was like the real thing sold at the time.
Face. Yeah, and I was like, oh, thank you. Yeah,
because they didn't want this one. They didn't want.
Her face fell off while we were shooting once. And I was like, no.
Oh, man. Okay, so up next we got the Goo Goo Dolls. Goo Goo Dolls. Remember them? No, they're still going.
Unusual.
Ain't that unusual? Goo Goo Dolls kind of get remembered as being this, they got the songs like Iris from City of Angels, and a lot of it's like really weepy, Black Balloon, all these weepy kind of heartfelt songs. But they were kind of a rockin' band before, all those songs blew up for them. They were a little bit more like a rough around the edges. Everybody just gives them a hard time because the lead singer looks like a GQ model. He had
they were less angsty.
Yeah, they were less angsty.
That's what I liked about them.
Yeah.
They had an opinion about what was going on.
Yeah.
And the opinion was It's an opinion that only somebody that could be on the cover of GQ could have because they've dealt with it or they haven't had to deal with it.
Yeah.
You know, but they're still living in the time. So the music hits, you know, I feel like they used one of the songs too on Varsity Blues.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's just one of those things where it's that feel, you know?
Yeah. You know, James Van Der Beek, this was kind of one of his first roles too, because this movie is pre-Dawson.
Is his. Yeah. In fact, they wanted us to work together so badly. I went out for Pacey in Dawson's Creek 12 times.
You did?
I got paid, yeah. Because they weren't sure how to play it. And then it was between me and him,
Josh Jackson.
And they were just like, you know, I think we're going to go with him because he's got a sexier appeal to him.
Yeah.
And they were honest with me, which was great, you know, but they loved my read. I was in love with that script. And I was just like, okay, I'm doing the right thing. I'm going on the right path. And then I also read for Billy Bob and Varsity Blues because people really wanted us to work together. And I wasn't big enough. Yeah. And then I ended up going in for Billy Bob and Not Another Teen Movie. Billy Ray, I think they called the character.
Yeah.
And I remember destroying a light. Joe Gallen, who does all the MTV Movie Awards and things like that, spoof parody king, and music show award show king. And I broke a light in the audition, and I just looked up and said, "You just need to go with Ron." You know, and they went with Ron. And then I ended up booking the part of Billy Bob on the MTV series, which ended up getting picked up but not going because of Undressed. Yeah. And I was like, this is the way it is. But I was never fat in the traditional sense because when you film something, it's always from the neck up, and I don't have a larger neck like that.
Yeah.
So it never read that way. That was always the trickiest part about my career. And I think that's why I work more now is because down here where I work in the Southeast, most people, like I've worked with Barry Jenkins, Martin Scorsese just saw me a couple times for his last movie. Yeah. Like I've been very fortunate that they are now seeing who I am and not just looking at the physicality of myself, which is great.
I think you bringing that up is interesting because I did have a thought. You know, I'm a dad. I've got 2 sons, and you know, raising children of my own. I wondered if being cast. Now, of course, it was an amazing opportunity, but it's not like we don't have issues with how we perceive ourselves. And being cast in a movie where the storyline is that you're fat or you're, you know, whatever. How did that feel being the age that you were and having to kind of wear that on your sleeve? Was it something hard, or were you just, I don't know. Tell me.
I was picked on a lot, more so than Angus, and I became quite the little prick because of it, you know?
Yeah.
Like I would fight their attacks with humor, and I became this sharp-witted little fucker, you know? And when Angus came about, it was kind of nice to tell everybody my story, even those that were kind of against me. You know, and it's one of those things like, well, one of my bullies, I just wished him a happy birthday. Today was his birthday, and I wished him a happy birthday.
Really?
And he was a verbal and mental abuser. And it's one of those things where, like, it's like you were going through a thing, you know, and this was my life. I don't know what your life is like, but I got to share this with the world. So there's no reason for us not to be friends, you know, and it's one of those things where it felt really good to share that with the world. Now, I'm relatively glad that it didn't become this huge success because God knows what would have happened.
Right.
You know, gregarious, outgoing, a guy who does stand up, you know, there's going to be a little bit of craziness. And if you will, you know, that much craziness. And I was supposed to play Farley's son a month before he died.
Really?
And I had his jacket from Beverly Hills Ninja, and I wore that in a few films, Who's Your Daddy, and a couple other films. And it was created by Greg Nicotero. In fact, I just sent that back to Greg as a thank you for being awesome and making that jacket, because it needs to go in a collection that'll be honored, because the original fella, you know, it's one of those things where to be able to share that. And Farley said to me before he passed that night, we were dancing in front, we were talking, it was his brother's show, Kevin Farley, and it was called Head Over Heels with Peter Dobson. And it was about a dating service. And I remember him saying to me, as I did an impersonation for him, because he goes, remember, don't let them laugh at you. Make sure they're laughing with you. Wow. And that was one of those things that stuck with me for the rest of my life. So I was really glad in retrospect that Angus did what it did and it's doing what it's doing now.
Yeah. That's amazing, man. And you inspire me because maybe I need to forgive my bullies because I haven't yet.
You know, I
still hold so much resentment in my heart.
I think it forced me to be more creative, you know, and bullying is not a good thing by any stretch of the standard, especially with how accessible we are through social media, et cetera. But razzing, and I guess it was more of an inferior way to tell somebody, hey, something's a little off with you. And just so you know, this is how you fix it.
Yeah.
You know, pointing it out because we're so rough. It's like you said in Angus, where we pick on each other, then we immediately make up. Well, people that don't know each other don't know how to make up, but they know how to pick on each other to tell them the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
You know, and if that embarrassed you, maybe you should do something about it. And that was, it's like for me, it was a toss up, but that was only for me agreeable and accessible in the time I lived in. Now, because of the way social media is shaped and everything like that, it's not acceptable. You should not, and you cannot. And if you want to be somebody's friend, that's the way to go. Yeah. And that's what I've learned growing up, and that's why I'm friends with the people that were rough to me. You know?
Yeah, I was, I'm half joking. I don't really keep in touch with many of them, but I did tell my son recently, because he's in 7th grade, this is right around the time where things just become a nightmare in terms of how kids treat each other. And so I was asking him about his, how he's dealing with school. And I mean, post-pandemic, this generation is going to skip over a lot of probably meanness because I think they're grateful to just be back in school again, and they're all still wearing masks on their faces. So you kind of go, he may not have that same edge that I have, but I was telling him a story about how I was picked on and how I ate lunch in the bathroom and, all these things. And he was like, oh my God, Dad, that's terrible. And I looked at him and I said, yeah, but it's why I'm funny. I said, it's why I'm funny. I figured out that I learned that the only way to get out of this was to make people laugh and to entertain them. And I was like, I really, that it was awful when I went through it, and it was awful when people were mean like that. But it gave me this little hack, which was you can kind of get out of a lot of problems as long as you're, you make people laugh and you entertain them. And you've done the same thing, which is you just take it and you turn it into a gift.
And that's when you shared your first batch of mead with your son.
Legally, I'm not allowed to say that on the show, but yeah, no, right. I cannot wait, honestly, until I can pour that boy a glass of mead with his dad, and we can drink it in the tavern together. So you got to come out to LA because you got to come hang in the tavern that I built in my garage.
I don't have to do anything.
Yes, you do, Charlie. You have to come see me.
See, this is bullying, guys. Please,
this is classic bullying. Jacob's bullying Charlie.
Classic. He made me do a TikTok. He didn't make a TikTok. I was just inspired.
By the way, we mentioned that kind of at the top of the show, I think, which is, so one of the reasons that got us together again was I did Mazzy Star's Fade Into You. I did the TikTok, and I did this silly thing about being broken up with, and that song for me, somebody wrote in my comments that song made them feel sexy, and I was like, I always felt really sad when I listened to Mazzy Star's Fade Into You. So I made this TikTok, and in the comments, that's where people started going like, I'll never be able to hear this song and not think of Angus. And then I was like, aha. And then sure enough, Charlie made a TikTok, and he duetted me. He took the video and he made a little thing of him hanging that picture on the wall, and I loved it. I'm so honored. I'm glad that you made that.
I made that exactly 1 hour ago. 1 hour ago.
No. He's wearing the same clothes that he's wearing in the TikTok. But all right, so we're gonna wrap up a few more songs, but we have Funny Face by the Muffs that comes up next. And sadly, we lost Kim Shattuck. She passed away after a 2-year battle of ALS in the year 2019, and she was kind of an iconic female performer, but that was another band that was, being managed by the music supervisors. But I'm glad that they're included on this iconic soundtrack because the Muffs were a great band, and R.I.P. to Kim Shattuck.
That song hit me. I love that song. Just a funny face, but it's one of those things where I out of all the songs, I identified with that song most in the soundtrack.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's a great song. And then we've got after that we've got White Homes by Tilt. I it's funny because I remember this song, but I just don't know if I listened to it a lot. I kind of re-listened to it while I was going through the soundtrack again, and I was like, Tilt, okay, so they're not still playing together. And I looked up a little bit. Tilt was the lead singer was Cinderblock, and she went on after Tilt and formed a hardcore punk band, Retching Red. But Cinderblock is a legendary punk singer that I've heard that name said before, and I didn't know she was involved in Tilt. But another great, perfect addition to the soundtrack on that song right there. So then we have Deep Water by Pansy Division, which is what we talked about, earlier with the inclusion of a gay punk band and how important that was. And that was a statement. And nowadays you would tell somebody that and they'd be like, big deal. Lil Nas X is gay and everybody's fine with it. And back then you'd be like, well, there was a time where it was a problem.
We had, as far as I understood, we had Maltaf cocktails being
Really?
checked out in the parking lot while we were shooting the football scene because of the gay fathers. That's the intensity that it was frowned upon. And that's why I was so excited about that storyline getting out there.
Sure.
And it's a weird thing that I would recognize that at that age, that this is heavy and this is poignant. And it wasn't in your face.
Yeah.
You know, it was just there and it was a fact of life. And for that to go away, that really made me sad. But, you know, Chuck Roven was one of the producers. He was married to Dawn Steele, who was produced that, Cool Runnings, etc. And you know, they had to conform. You know, it was a New Line and Turner production. And it was one of those things where it's like you in that job, you do have to, at that time, you had to cater to the mass media.
Yeah.
And it was a very difficult movie to shave down.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, nowadays it can, you know, we can tell the story of what was supposed to be there, you know, on the original film. And it's still, the film means a lot to a lot of people, especially me. And I know that it's important that you're, you know, touching people's lives to this day. And we have the last one, which you talked about earlier, which was Love Spit Love. That's the last song on the album. But there's another song when I was watching the film that didn't make the soundtrack as well, which was Peter Gabriel's Washing of the Water.
Washing of the Water, yes.
Yeah, that's the chess scene. I was watching the movie and I was going, that's Peter Gabriel's voice right there. And I was going, well, that's not on the soundtrack. So there were some songs that didn't make the final cut, you know, but on the soundtrack at least. I'm sure there's probably an extended Angus soundtrack out there somewhere.
Well, don't forget Hot, Hot, Hot. That was your point.
That's right. Hot, Hot, Hot. I can't forget Hot, Hot, Hot. That's in the
there's
movie.
There's some poignant songs like Interstate
Hot,
Polka
hot,
and
hot.
Hot, Hot, Hot that make the movie what it is, you know.
So great.
It's just, but I got to say Washing of the Water, that song, that really lets you think about what you've just watched when that song plays through, and it helps you identify with your own life and the passing of time. And, you know, it was that, you know, that and, you know, Mazzy Star, you know, that was crushing.
But it was fantastic. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Angus soundtrack with Angus himself, Charlie Talbert. Dude, this has been an absolute blast. Not only just getting a chance to reminisce and hang out with you, but getting this FaceTime, you know, because we don't get to see each other very much. And now I'd wish that over the pandemic that we'd done some, you know, some games or movie watching over Zoom. And now we'll just have to do that since we can hang out.
Absolutely. I'm only a phone away.
Only a phone away. And Charlie always sends me a message on my birthday. He always does. It's so great. It's a tradition now where I know on my birthday I'm going to get a message from Charlie. It's a little video message. It's great.
I'm sure I've dropped the ball once or twice.
Maybe, but I don't like to believe that. I think I've dropped the ball on every single one of your birthdays.
You know, I do. I use my Instagram, which is Charlie Talbert _performer. If you reach out to me through that and you know, things like that, I'll write back to you. I'll talk to you. But one of the things I was doing when I had Facebook was I was like, you know what, just go through every day, people that you know, what have you, or people that are fans, you know, I try to go through and I do the birthday wish. So every day I go through and, you know, when I can, and I send out those messages unless I'm working or something.
That's so cool. That you actually, that was going to be my next question, which is how can people find you and how can they follow your career and the things that you're up to? And you just gave the Instagram, which is a good place to go. Say it again for me. So it's Charlie Talbert _performer. Yeah,
Charlie Talbert, Charlie IE, Talbert _performer. I'm on Twitter, but I'm not a huge Twitter freak. I usually respond more to my Instagram than anything.
Yeah.
Even if you send me a private message and we're not friends, I'll go through there. And then to find out what I'm working on, you can go right to my IMDb page. Love and Death isn't on there yet because I'm still shooting it.
Coming soon, though?
Yeah, it'll be out on HBO Max. So.
Awesome. So we'll have to, everybody will have to go check that out and support and, you know, be there for Charlie's career because I'm a big fan. I think he does great work. He was a remarkable actor in Angus and he has been ever since, only gotten better and grown and just really shown his chops. And you can see that now people can see just the talent in him and using him appropriately. So I'm excited to see where your career goes over time. And just so excited that you came on the show. And yeah, you guys go follow Charlie. If you've never seen Angus, you should definitely go watch that and definitely crank up that soundtrack and remember the good old days back in 1995.
Oh, well, thank you, man. Thank you. This has been a blast.
It was awesome, Charlie. This was a blast. And thank you again for coming on Waterproof Records. And we'll see you next time.
Absolutely, my friend. Remember, there is no normal.
There is no normal.
Things are gonna change. I can feel it.
If this gonna be that kind of party, I'm gonna...
Waterproof